All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this month's Let's Talk Parkinson's. Great to see you all on here this afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. Guest speaking today, we have Dr. Paolo Pelliccioni. He is a lecturer at Uni of New South Wales in Sydney, the School of Health Sciences, and he's a physiotherapist by background, and he's also very, very involved in Parkinson's research. And he will be speaking on instability, postural instability and balance today. So thanks, Paolo, for agreeing to speak and imparting your knowledge. And I'll pass over to you to present. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy, and thanks everyone for being here today. It's a great pleasure. I speak from the Warrow land here, down in the Shire in Sylvania, and it's always a pleasure being here. I also coordinate the support group in the Inner West, but every now and again, I get the mission to give a talk about some topics mostly related to balance falls and which I always try to cover it, and it's always a great pleasure, honestly. I prepared some slides just to give kind of an overall and broad approach about balance and posture instability, with the main focus of falls. So we know that falls are not an easy, you know, event that happens in the one's lives, but that's why we need to talk about it, not just to think about how bad falls could be, but just to understand symptoms that are associated with falls and what we could do to prevent them. So I will share my slides with you. I will talk today about balance and posture instability in Parkinson's, but I will also cover some aspects of walking, functional mobility, since they're all intricate. So we need to have, when we talk about humans overall and animals as well, we need to have a good balance so we can move forward and we can move around as well. So it's all intricate. So if I don't cover one point very specifically, it's more because I'm trying to give a kind of like broad approach. And also, if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm very happy to answer them later on. Oops, okay. So Parkinson's, everyone has seen this figure before, right? That's a kind of like old and outdated picture that when people spoke about Parkinson's, they always brought that picture in, but Parkinson's does not necessarily look like that picture. I always like to say, for example, if we get everyone from this Zoom meeting here, I'm assuming there are like about 50 people with Parkinson's there. If we put all of them in a room and give the mission within 1 hour, find your match based on your experiences and symptoms, will verily like kind of unlikely to find their match because the condition is so heterogeneous. People experience different symptoms, signs, they have previous history and some clinical information that differ amongst one another. So Parkinson's itself, it's very heterogeneous. We know that it's a progressive condition, so I'll be talking a little bit about it soon. And the manifestation of Parkinson's occur through motor and non-motor symptoms, and I'll talk about them very soon as well. And we also have some motor complications in Parkinson's that usually occur from Levodopa or the main Parkinson's medication intake, and I'll cover them in a bit. So just speaking about the heterogeneity of the condition, this picture, please let's not use and refer about Parkinson's thinking on it, because Parkinson's has so many faces. So when we talk about motor symptoms, Parkinson's manifests with different ones. These are the most common ones. Bradykinesia, which is that global slowness that we see present in some people diagnosed with Parkinson's. It tends to be the most important and one of the most common symptoms. the resting tremor or the shakes that people end up having, the rigidity, those, which is that stiffness that people have around their joints, usually on their necks, arms, and legs. Postural instability, which manifests when the person's balance gets a little bit wobbly. Some people ends up presenting some stupid posture and some changes in their posture and some gait disorders that it's usually seen with some short steps, some wide steps as well, and sometimes some difficulties with walking too. And we have no motor symptoms. In a nutshell, anything that it's not related with movement, we consider as no motor symptoms. Here are some of the most common ones: anxiety, depression, some cognitive impairment, some sleep disorders, and so on. And why I bring both of them, motor and non-motor symptoms, since our goal is to talk about posture instability and balance. It's just because when the one's stability and balance gets compromised, people tend to become more likely to fall. But when we talk about falls, they are not just caused because of issues in balance and posture. Falls are actually multifactorial. People could fall because they are not paying attention in their environment, or maybe because their vision, is not working very well. So maybe the one hasn't seen an optometrist like in the last 3 4 years, and then the glasses are not working well, so the person can't see things on the way, trip over, and end up having a fall. And it's always good also to talk about these symptoms, just to remember that those could be present. Again, I like this picture from Parkinson's New South Wales, actually, that mentions the Parkinson's iceberg. Sometimes we get mistaken by what we can see, but actually, Parkinson's is much more than that. And whenever you feel something different going on, talk to your Parkinson's nurse, talk to your neurologist, geriatrician, or to any uh, and medical uh, allied health and medical person that you've been working with, so you can report anything that you've been feeling, so they can help you out. And today we'll talk about mostly on these two, posture instability, and I put balance together in that basket, as well as some gait issues. So whenever you attend more scientific talk on Parkinson's, you see this timeline. They call it Brack timeline, that pretty much shows the course of Parkinson's. So when the one ends up having their first symptoms, like the shakes or some rigidity, some change in their facial expressions, and they end up seeing a neurologist, it means that they have probably been living with Parkinson's for a while. And when we talk about balance and falls, that means that that person might be living with Parkinson's for a good 10 years, or like after diagnosis or more. Of course, some balance and some walking issues can be present as soon as you are diagnosed, but as I mentioned before, Parkinson's is progressive. And once you start noticing some issues with your balance, posture, and walking, it means that some progression is happening. So please do not forget to report this to your to the health professionals and medical professionals that you've been working on. These figures, see, they're very complicated, but what I wanted to show you is that Parkinson's is a condition that happens in people's brain, in their central nervous system. So this is what we call a kind of classic model of their basal ganglia, that region of the brain that it's affected in Parkinson's. So on the left side, we have kind of a scheme of someone who is healthy, meaning that the person doesn't have Parkinson's. But when we see someone with Parkinson's, there is some imbalance on some of the pathways that happens in that area of the brain, and also in how much dopamine is generated in that part of the brain. So that's why the doctors end up prescribing to most of you any medication that has levodopa. Some people take modopar, and there's like so many different types of drugs just to try to balance this out. So their their basal ganglia or the central nervous system kind of looks like this at the end, and then their movements can be somehow fixed. However, we do know that the Parkinson's medication helps. I'm not making any claiming against it, not at all. We still consider levodopa as the gold standard treatment for Parkinson's symptoms, and it helps with the shakes, it helps with the slowness, it helps also with the stiffness. However, when we think about walking and balance, that's when the medication, we still do not have 100% certainty that the medication helps with each aspect of walking and balance. So I just got this picture from one very famous study from Carolyn Kurtz in the United States, in Oregon. And they pretty much tested people with Parkinson's after their medication. And they tested all sorts of outcomes related to balance, uh, arm swing, step length, like the quality of their walking, how much they sway from one side to another. And here, everything that we see on the right side, it's a positive response regarding to levodopa intake. But to the left side, we see actually that some of the Parkinson's balance characteristics ends up getting worse with the medication intake. I'm not telling you to stop taking. Actually, I think when people weigh it down, the benefits of the levodopa ends up being better than any kind of imbalance that might cause in posture. But it's always good for us to know, okay, how is this imbalance happening? Yes. And also it's always good for us to understand, okay, uh, just levodopa is not sufficient. We need to do something else aside from the drugs that we take. So back in 2018, we tried to explore this to understand, okay, how much levodopa can actually affect in the quality of the ones walking. So we pretty much put some sensor in people's head and people's on people's waist level as well, and we asked them just to walk back and forth in the corridor. So I would just try to summarize these like kind of like tricky figures, and then we can see here the dashed line called PIGT that represents the group of people with Parkinson's who has more balance and walking issues, and the non-PIGT are um, marked by the bold black line, represents people who don't have many walking and balance issues. So those who don't have many balance and walking issues, when they take their medication, their walking gets way better. So they don't have many walking issues. Actually, since it's very mild, actually gets way better. So they stop having, or those issues end up reducing. But people who already present from the get-go some walking balance issues, actually the medication makes their walking and balance more unstable, and mainly they're walking. So when we look into some very fancy techniques, we can see some instability, people moving their heads and being more unstable as well as on a waist level. And when we look into these kind of fancy techniques, uh, we notice that people who take more than 750 milligrams of levodopa per day, their walking gets like more affected as well. So that shows us that any medication treatment, it's not a one size fits all, and that concept that the more the merrier, it's also not true, people end up being more unstable as well for all sorts of reasons that we still do not understand, but also for reasons such as dyskinesia. So we know that people who have been taking the Parkinson's medication for years and years, they might have some motor complications such as those uncontrolled movements on their heads and their arms and legs called dyskinesia. So those can affect balance and walking. And I currently have a few students looking into that, how dyskinesia actually can impact the walking, the posture, and increase the risk of falling of those with Parkinson's. However, I spoke about the medication. Okay, medication helps people out, but some issues with balance and walking, they don't get fixed with the medication. And we have physical exercise for that. Yes, so before I started this talk, Stacy shared some of your questions with me about exercise. I'll cover some of them, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have about the exercise later on. So usually in research, we do this type of studies called systematic review and meta-analysis. We pretty much group all sorts of evidence available, evidence that are robust, of studies that were done nicely to kind of summarize, okay, this is what we know, and that's how we can move onwards. And we found out in this nice study that the effects of physical exercise on functional mobility are assessed by one test called timed up and go. Pretty much we tried to understand the effects of different types of exercise on how people move around. For example, getting up from a chair, walking, turning. So in all these outcomes grouped. So what we found out was that I will show you this graph that it's a little bit technical, but just to give you an example, if the arrow points to the left, it means that when people did exercise, actually they got better. If any results go to the right side, it means that people got worse. Or actually comparing exercise with nothing to the left side means that exercise was more beneficial than doing nothing. So there were like some good evidence that different modalities of exercise actually improve functional mobility, such as aqua exercise, and I'll talk about them a little bit, mind and body, dance, endurance exercise, walking, balance and functional exercise, strength and resistance training, and multi training. And here are some of the modalities that were proven to be beneficial to improve this functional mobility. So as aqua-based training, there are all sorts of things that can be done, such as water-based physiotherapy, some hydrotherapy, some aquatic exercise training. For dance, there is some evidence that uh, waltz, foxtrot, tango, they improve these symptoms in Parkinson's. Different modalities of endurance training, such as aerobic training, the Nordic walking with those poles, and for gait, balance, and functional training, any high balance training, treadmill training, or functional mobility training can help out. And also mind-body training, such as Tai Chi, yoga, and multi-domain training when it comprises two or more domains, such as combining balance and strength training or aerobic and balance training together. Yeah, and then for exercise overall, these authors, they found out that, okay, exercise helps. These modalities end up helping functional mobility. But one thing that the one has to keep in mind is that there are some considerations, such as increased risk of falling during the exercise, not for everyone, but for example, let's say you are doing some balance exercise and you are just spinning, turning around at the gym. Of course, you might be more likely just to lose your balance a little bit. So of course, for some people, doing this exercise under supervision is actually important, and I'll talk about this very soon. And some people might experience pain as well. So these are some considerations. It's not to put you off doing exercise, but just to keep those factors in mind. So for falls prevention, again, we know that falls are prevalent in Parkinson's. So from 45 to 68% of people with Parkinson's had one fall per year, and this number increases for people having two or more falls in each year. And falls, as I mentioned before, ends up being more likely to happen when balance and walking issues start happening, and it usually occurs with the progression of Parkinson's. And those ones who are more likely to fall are those people who we call scientifically PIDD, those ones who have more postural instability and gait difficulties, those ones who have freezing of gait. Falls usually happen from balance related circumstances, as we call, caused by trips and sleeps, and in Parkinson's falls at home, they end up becoming more common. So again, having some chats with OT to help you to set your house accordingly, it's equally important, not just exercise, but I'm not going too much into details in this talk. There are exercises to prevent falls. So Natalie Allen from the University of Sydney, some of you might have met her before. She's done this really, really nice study investigating the effects of different modalities of exercise on reducing the number of falls per month in people with Parkinson's. So overall, this study showed that exercise actually is beneficial, as you can see on that arrow that it's pointing down here. Uh, any exercise in comparison to nothing is actually beneficial to reduce falls in Parkinson's, which is great. And when we look at different modalities of exercise, we can see that gait, balance, and functional training versus nothing reduce falls per month in Parkinson's. Resistance training, it's also good for that. And also what we call 3D exercise. Some techniques that involve some Tai Chi, it's also beneficial to improve falls, to reduce the number of falls per month. When we talk about supervised and unsupervised exercise, we also see some benefits of exercise overall, for both supervised and not 100% supervised. So it's good to show you that there are different modalities of exercise that you might be able to join, but also there is a preference about doing exercise 100 supervised or not. So both of them are beneficial. And then when we look at individuals who are at high and knowing specific fall risk, we see that people in both high and not specified falls risk, both of them end up reducing their number of falls per month um, after taking up on exercise. Um, However, when we look at people with Parkinson's who are at more moderate to advanced stages of Parkinson's, those who present more severity, unfortunately, exercise actually ends up making them more likely to fall. So this could be maybe because the exposure to exercise for those who already don't have great balance and great walking might make them more risky to fall. So that's something that we might need to think about exercise. So instead of thinking about exercising, in this instance, these people in particular should talk to their physiotherapist to see, okay, can we think about something any specific, and with their neurologists as well, to try to find out, okay, what can we do to reduce falls in people with high severity. And there are all sorts of exercise considerations. So exercise, as the summary of these studies showed, it seems to be beneficial to reduce the number of falls per month, but we need to have some considerations. So as I just mentioned, high disease severity, increased falls risk. People who have dyskinesia, sometimes they can get so much uncontrolled movement that they might move around and they might hurt themselves. So if that happens, you need to think about that, report that to your exercise physiologist or to your physio, so they can arrange the proper setting for you to do exercise. So if you end up having some uncontrolled shakes or the tremor, for example, just imagine you holding a bar at the gym and you are shaking too much. That can make things a little bit tricky, so that can affect the safety as well. So keep that in mind. Speak to the health professionals that are working with you. One thing that we advise is to do the exercise when the medication is working nicely, because it helps you to get more benefits. Sometimes when people are doing exercising when the medication is off, or when the medication is not working very well, people might get a little bit stiff and they might not get the best benefits of the exercise. For those ones who already have some cognitive issues like memory or attention, or if the doctor reported to you that you might be experiencing some cognitive issues, not just for you, but for the carers present, that's a consideration, something to think about, to talk to the health professionals that you are working together, so you can take that into consideration during the exercise treatment as well. People with freezing, we need to be very careful, because we don't want anyone stuck between one machine and another and then having that risk of falling and hurting themselves. Some of you experience that drop in blood pressure, which is called orthostatic hypotension. So that's something that you always need to keep in mind as well, to not get up too quickly, and always report that to the professional that you are working together. And if you have any other issues aside from your Parkinson's, for example, knee osteoarthritis, or whatever issue that you have, high blood pressure, diabetes, always talk to the professionals that you are working on, so the exercise can be accommodated to these conditions as well. And if you end up having any pain during the exercise, just take it easy, stop, report to the professional that you are working on, so you can adjust your exercise to that as well, because no pain, no gains, no such a thing. We don't want to feel pain and feel discomfort while we are doing something that is actually meant to make us feel better, not worse. And I think that's that. Honestly, to talk about exercise and all the options and very details, we would need to have like a 1 day picnic. We would need to have coffee and food and talk all day. But I hope this talk was useful for you to have some understanding. And if you have any specific questions, I'm very happy to answer to you and Stacy. My email is here as well, and feel free to ask me any questions, and I would love to answer to them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paolo. All right, well, that brings us to the end. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And a big thanks to you, Paolo, for giving up your time
No
and
problems.
presenting.
Yes.
Really appreciate all that really helpful information.